All right, welcome to the final section of the Geospatial Analysis and Cartography in R tutorial, where we will cover how to convert our pretty simple, somewhat boring maps into professional looking, colorful and detailed final products. So for each of these maps, I'm going to go through the maps that we created across this entire tutorial. So the ones using OpenStreetMap, the one using our online data showing avalanches, and then our elevation data map. And I'm just going to outline some of the things that you can do to change colors, change positionings of legends, change background colors, and apply some nice fonts and titles to kind of emphasize some of the information that you're conveying in your map. So I'm going to start off by going through and adding some colors to our OpenStreetMap maps. So already we kind of covered how to do this using our whites and our blues and our blacks. But one thing that I find to be really enjoyable is kind of picking different color palettes, especially if I'm making maps that are complementary to one another. So in this case, we made two OpenStreetMaps, one showing the roads and water for the city center in Zurich, and then one showing roads and water for Interlaken. And one thing that I'll do is use the same kind of darker black and beige colors that I've been kind of using throughout the tutorial. And I'll create a couple of inverted color maps showing our Zurich city center and our Interlaken city center. So in the first section here, I've just copied the code from when we originally made our Zurich map using our same data points from our circle, the roads, and cropped water objects, as well as our coordinate SF and our theme void. And I'm just going to save this as an object called plot, just so it's saved and I can save it as a PNG. And that's what you'll be seeing in the final output in the tutorial. So for my circle in this case, I'm going to fill it with my kind of dark black color. I'm going to make my roads this nice light beige, and I'm just going to change the water to a nicer teal color rather than a kind of bright blue. And you can see when I do that, I now have a nice dark circle with my roads highlighted in whiter colors and my nice teal water from the lake going through it. And I'm going to do the opposite for my Interlaken plot. So rather than have my fill be this black and the roads be lighter, I'm going to have the background be the lighter beige and the roads be black and still have my water as the same teal color. So you can see just how much of a difference just a swap of colors can make. I personally am a big fan of the kind of dark background, lighter contrasting lines, but you may prefer the opposite. And it's a really good opportunity to play around with colors and palettes and see what you're drawn to and what you think kind of emphasizes the information that you're trying to convey in the best way. All right, scrolling down to our online open data plot. So this is the plot that we made showing the proportion of avalanches across all of these years of avalanche data from this environmental data set that we downloaded. We want to plot the proportion of avalanches per canton or per region in Switzerland. So we already played around a little bit with how to change the colors, and I'm not going to do any sort of color changing in this case, but one thing I do want to emphasize here is how I can make my scale a little more interpretable. So I'm going to have the same Geom SF showing the canton administrative boundaries and showing the geometries and fills of those cantons based on the proportion of avalanches that happen within that canton versus another. And I'm going to use the same gradient of my beige and dark orange. But this time, because I'm plotting a proportion, so a value of 0.3 would mean that about 30% of all of these avalanches are happening in this one canton. I want to adjust my scale to reflect that this value is a percentage. So I'm going to specify that my labels come from the scales package, and I just want to make my labels into a percent. So this will, instead of saying 0.3 being this kind of darker red color, it will show in my plot as 30%. The other things that I'll do are just include my coord SF and theme void arguments to kind of extract or extract the map from any sort of background information that would be plotted by default in ggplot otherwise. And I'm just going to add some theme arguments to make my positioning and thickness of my legend just a little bit nicer to look at, in my opinion. So when I execute this line of code and kind of paste it in the window, I now see that my gradient from kind of beige to darker red now is going from 0% to a little over 30%. So this is now showing that my values are representing a proportion of avalanches. One thing that I didn't do here that I invite you to challenge yourself to do is add some text to this plot. Like from what we see now, we don't actually have any information about what's being conveyed. What's 30% in this case? So adding some sort of text to specify that these represent number of avalanches or proportions of avalanches over a specified period of time in Switzerland. Unless you're kind of a geography nerd like me, you may not recognize that this is Switzerland just from the shape of the country on its own. So there's a lot that text can do to kind of add information beyond what we can do with colors and shapes. Okay, finally, we will talk about customizing the elevation map. So this one you'll see is a lot more complicated, but the end result is, I think, just a little bit cleaner and adds an example of what you can do with some fun text. So the first thing that I do in this chunk of code is add one of these fonts from Google using the show text package that we loaded earlier in the elevation section. And I'm going to load a font called Sacramento and just specify that I can call it just using a lowercase version of Sacramento later on. To my ggplot, I'm going to first plot my Swiss administrative boundary. I'm going to make this this kind of dark black color that we've been using, and I'm going to add my contour lines on top of it. I'm going to use another version of scale color gradient, but you'll see this time it's scale gradient N, which is just allowing me to specify the number of colors and the kind of like range of colors in my gradient that I want to use and where the breaks in my gradient should be. So as you may have noticed in the first elevation map that we created, our elevation kind of jumps from 0 to 4,000 meters. But sometimes the way that the default color gradient works is you may not be able to really differentiate portions where there's a lot of elevation at 3,000 meters, but kind of nothing at 2,000 meters, for example. So the colors might all kind of blend together. So by specifying these different breaks, I can kind of change the color emphasis as we jump in elevation. The next thing in this section of ggplot code is a function called annotate. And in this section, I'm doing a lot of kind of complicated manual adjustments to add a label of Switzerland to my map. So one thing that I love to do, and this may just be a personal preference, is I really love adding kind of cool descriptive fonts and titles, cool descriptive titles in cool fonts. So I'm using this Sacramento font that I loaded in from Google to actually create this Switzerland label. And all of the specifications like X, Y, HJust, and VJust are just specifying where exactly I want to place the word Switzerland on my map. And then finally, I'm adding my theme void and my coord SF. And I'm just changing the color of my plot background to match the kind of light blue that I specify for my contour lines. And when we plot this again, we can see now that we have this nice kind of dark black against a light blue background. And we can see that as elevation is increasing in different parts of the country, it's getting to be this lighter and lighter blue. And now in the top left corner of the map, we have just a nice stylized print of the word Switzerland. So these are just some ideas for what you can do for customizations. Customizing is truly something that can take you minutes or take you hours, depending on how much you really want to do. And it's one of the things that I find to be most enjoyable when it comes to making maps. It really allows kind of like the creative side of my coding to come through. So I hope it was helpful to see just some examples of some things you can do. But there are many, many more tutorials out there that show how to do different things and things that I've never even tried. So if you are as excited about customizing as I am, I really encourage you to do some more research and play around for yourself.